Hello and welcome to Better Work Days, a show dedicated to helping everyday professionals create better days at work. I'm your host, Andy Morrison from Real Custom Training, where we design and deliver professional development workshops that are relevant, engaging, actionable, and lasting. Each week on Better Work Days, we'll be taking a look at a specific concept, skill, or story that we use in our workshops. We'll make sure that they're easy to understand, fun to learn about, and most importantly, that they can be applied immediately in the workplace as soon as you finish the episode. Thank you for joining us. It's time for Better Work Days from Real Custom Training. Hey everyone, welcome back to Better Work Days, brought to you by Real Custom Training, where we help good bosses become great leaders. I'm your host, Andy Morrison, and this week's topic, we're going to look at power in the workplace. Now, this is building on, we did an episode recently on situational leadership. All right. And I'm going to continue to pull from that area of study to talk about power dynamics for leaders in the workplace. But before we get into some of that academic stuff, let's see if there's a different source out there that can shed some light on the nature of power in the workplace and power in leadership. So here's what we're going to do. Let's take a look at a show you may have heard of. It's called Game of Thrones. It aired on HBO. Oh, I don't know how many years ago it concluded. All right. Spoiler alert. Don't watch this clip with us if you have not seen Game of Thrones and you think you might want to go back and watch it, because they do reference a pretty important event. A rather important beheading is referenced in this clip. So don't watch it if you don't want spoilers. If you watch it and you get spoiled, do not come back at me. You have been warned. Now, in this clip, Lord Varys, the bald fellow that you can see on your screen here, he's talking to Tyrion Lannister. Tyrion is a member of the Lannister family, a very powerful family in the world of Game of Thrones. Varys is powerful in his own right. He wasn't born into power. He had to scrap for it and accumulate it for himself. Tyrion, similarly, although he's born into a powerful family, he is the black sheep of his family, and any power that he has to seek out himself and really fight and scrap for to get. So these two characters, who have both had to work hard to acquire any kind of power in their lives, are having a discussion about the nature of power. And I think it includes a really valuable lesson, which is that perception is everything when it comes to power, whether that's in Game of Thrones or in the modern day workplace. So check out this clip.
Power is a curious thing, my lord. Are you fond of riddles?
Why? Am I about to hear one?
3 great men sit in a room, a king, a priest, and a rich man. Between them stands a common sellsword. Each great man bids the sellsword kill the other 2. Who lives, who dies?
Depends on the sellsword.
Does it? He has neither crown, nor gold, nor favor with the gods.
He has a sword, the power of life and death.
But if it's swordsmen who rule, why do we pretend kings hold all the power? When Ned Stark lost his head, who was truly responsible? Joffrey, the executioner, or something else?
I've decided I don't like riddles.
Power resides where men believe it resides. It's a trick, a shadow on the wall. And a very small man can cast a very large shadow.
All right, I take mercy on you. I'm cutting it before they each take a sip and a gulp of wine, so you don't have to hear that. But that's the speech from Varys. I think it's a really interesting riddle. Basically, you've got the sellsword, an assassin, and he's caught between a king, a priest, and a rich man, each of whom is telling him to kill the other 2. Who has the power? And as Varys says, power resides where men believe it resides. In the case of that sellsword, the most power is held by the man that the sellsword believes has the most ability to influence the sellsword's life. Okay. So who's he going to be best off with by leaving alive and killing the other 2? That's going to determine who has the most power. And that is all about perception. It is the sellsword's perception of who has the ability to influence him the most that determines who actually has the most power in those circumstances. So that's the big takeaway from that clip. Power resides where people believe it resides. Varys is right. It's true in the world of Game of Thrones, and it's true in the modern day workplace as well. Power resides where people believe it resides. Followers grant leaders power based on their perception of the leader, and organizations grant leaders power based on the organization's perception of the leader. And we're going to take a deeper dive into that in this episode, but that's it in a nutshell. Varus is right. Leadership, the number one thing to keep in mind with workplace leadership is that it is all about perception. And let's take a little bit of a closer look at why and how that is the case. So in the workplace, you're going to get two types of power, all right? Position power and personal power. And we're pulling this from, like I said, we're continuing to build on situational leadership. So here's the book I recommend by Dr. Paul Hersey. That's what we're pulling this from today. And Dr. Paul Hersey, whether he knows it or not, agrees with Varus that it's all about perception. So position power, this is the power the organization gives you. And they're basically saying, hey, you now have some control over the rewards, punishments, and sanctions of other employees. That's positional power. The organization gives it to an individual. Personal power is given to the individual by the followers. All right. Your personal power is accumulated based on your followers' confidence and trust in you as the leader. So again, perception is key. All right. You don't get confidence and trust because you tell people to give you their confidence and trust. You get it because they perceive that you are worthy of it. And your actions can shape that perception on their part. Same thing with positional power. Your actions shape whether or not the organization decides to delegate to you positional power. And it's based on trust. So your trust, the trust you earn with the bosses, the higher ups, is going to get you positional power. The trust you earn from your followers, the people you're seeking to lead, is going to earn you your personal power. And your personal power is also going to be influenced by the extent to which your followers believe that your goals and their goals are the same, or that the achievement of your goals will benefit them in the long run. So sometimes, even if your goals aren't exactly the same on paper, you're going to have more personal power if your followers are invested in seeing you achieve your leadership goals because they believe, again, perception, they believe that the achievement of your goals will benefit them in the long run. So you can see, as Varus said, it resides where people believe it resides. If the bosses believe you're worthy, you're going to get some positional power. If your followers believe you're worthy of their confidence and their trust, you're going to earn some personal power. But even once you've earned it, if you lose that trust from either source, you can lose your positional power and you can lose your personal power. We'll quickly look at this, all right? So we broke down position power and personal power. We'll break them down a little bit further. You've got different types of power for each one of these categories. So for position power, the first type of position power is coercive power. So the boss who rules by relying on punishment is relying entirely on coercive power. You get this power based on the follower's perception that their failure will lead to punishments. Okay. Punishment could be termination, could be a crappy work assignment, could be putting them on a shift that they don't want to be on, could be yanking a project away from them that they care very much about. That's coercive power. Basically, the followers know and perceive, if I don't follow this leader the way they need me and want me to follow them, it's going to result in punishment. Connection power is your followers' perception that you're well connected in the organization and well connected in such a way that it could benefit them in the long run. All right. By being given positional power, you're automatically being given connection power because it sends the message to everybody. Oh, Andy got promoted to manager. Andy's got some juice in the organization. Andy's got some connections with the higher ups. Reward power, other side of the coin from coercive power. It's the ability or the perception that you have the ability to grant rewards. So approval of vacation days, raises, promotions, plum assignments, being given projects that you're really passionate about, all examples of reward power that the boss has. And then legitimate power. If you've ever gotten a new boss and there's some people on your team who say, hey, they're the boss, they're in charge, I'm going to do whatever they say. That's an example of someone who's adhering to legitimate power. Basically, it means you've got the title, therefore you've got the power. And again, it requires the perception of the followers that you have that title and you're therefore worthy of making the calls and calling the shots. Personal power, there's a few different types of personal power to keep in mind. Referent power, that's basically the follower's perception that it's going to benefit them to interact with you. Okay, so ask yourself this: when your employees make a mistake, do they hide it or do they bring it to your attention? If they bring it to your attention, that's a great indicator that you are cultivating referent power with your team. They believe interacting with you is going to benefit them, even if they're interacting to say, hey, boss, I messed up, or hey, boss, this didn't go the way I thought it would. Bosses that have referent power do a lot of listening, they do a lot of communicating, and they send the message that they're there to help the employee. So when the employee makes a mistake and brings it to them, they're not getting their head cut off. They're not being punished. You're not relying on coercive power. You're helping them through it, and you're developing them. So that's key to remember. Developing your employees is one way to build up referent power with your employees so that they perceive it as beneficial to interact with you as their boss. Information power. All right. When the boss goes to a meeting and comes back, a meeting with the higher ups, and comes back and everyone's clamoring, what'd you find out about this? What's the latest on that? What's the status of this? That's an indication that that boss has some information power. The followers perceive that the boss has access to information that's beneficial to them, that they don't have access to themselves, and they can only get it by being good followers to the leader. And then expert power. This is the opposite of legitimate power. Legitimate power, okay, type of positional power where people follow you because you've got the title. Expert power means they follow you because they believe you have the skills, knowledge, and ability and the expertise to be worthy of making the calls and calling the shots. So expert power means not only do you have the title, but you have backed it up, and your people perceive you as having backed it up, and they're willing to follow you because they see you as having the expertise worthy of following. So which type of power, position or personal, is most important? Which one should you spend most of your time trying to cultivate as a leader in the workplace? Of course, trick question, right? They're equally important. Your positional power affects your personal power and vice versa. They do not exist in a vacuum, all right? They are mutually influential systems. For example, when your bosses give you positional power, they are helping you build up personal power. Your followers, when they see you get promoted, when you're given some positional power, they're going to say, Andy's got some connections here. Andy's got access to information now. All right. You can see, so your positional power is going to build up your personal power and vice versa. The more personal power you cultivate, the more the bosses are going to look at you as worthy of trust, and the more positional power they're going to be willing to grant you. So they are interlocked. Okay. They are mutually influential on one another. You cannot disregard one for the sake of the other. You have to be concerned with both your positional power and your personal power. And keep in mind, like I said, this is building on situational leadership. Go back and watch our episode if you haven't yet, and this terminology will make more sense. But for your employees with lower levels of readiness, your individual contributors who might be enthusiastic but simply don't know what they're doing yet, they're going to respond better to positional power. They need direction. They need to know, yeah, you've got to get this job done because I decide whether you're going to get punished, which could be termination. Maybe you don't survive your probationary period, or I'm going to just decide if you get rewarded, which means you're doing a great job and we give you a little bit of a raise after 90 days or whatever it might be. But you can see how positional power is going to be more influential for employees at lower levels of readiness. Whereas your employees with higher levels of readiness, all right, your rock stars, they're going to respond better to personal power. Okay. Your rock stars, right? Highly motivated, self-achievers. You don't really need to be coercive with them, and you may not even need to be using rewards that much. They may be just intrinsically motivated to do a great job, in which case you're going to want to try to use personal power with them, especially referent power. Because remember, developing your employees is the key to referent power. The more they enjoy and see it as beneficial to interact with you, the more personal power you're going to have with them. So when you're interacting with your rock stars, you want to be interacting in a way that shows you appreciate their contributions, and you don't have to be as directive with them. They know how to do the job. So your interactions can mostly focus on how to help them continue to grow and how to help them feel appreciated by the organization. All right, here's your homework, okay? We talked about power this week. some action steps for you. First of all, conduct a self-assessment. Do you actually have any power at work? If you're an individual contributor and you're listening to this episode, one, I applaud you for that. You're on your way to becoming a supervisor, manager, or leader in the workplace because you're building knowledge and you're finding out the things that your managers and supervisors have already hopefully learned about. So you're going to be in a good position. But if you're an individual contributor, you could ask yourself, do you actually have any power? Chances are you don't have positional power. But if you're an individual contributor, start looking at it. Do you have personal power? Do you have the respect of your peers? Do you have the trust of your peers? Do people like working with you? That's referent power. Do they go to you because you have expertise? If you've got all those things, then you can start building your positional power by making sure the bosses see that you have that personal power. If the bosses aren't aware of it, again, perception is everything. If the bosses aren't aware of the fact that you have that personal power, it's not going to lead to positional power. So as Hersey says at one point, you've got to blow your own horn. You've got to be your own champion. You've got to be your own promoter. Make sure the bosses see the good work you're doing and see that you've accumulated personal power, because that's going to increase the likelihood that you are going to get some positional power. And as Hersey says, if you don't blow your own horn, someone else will use it as a spittoon. So do not be shy about championing yourself if you're an individual contributor and you'd like to move up. Start accumulating personal power and start making sure the people who can give you positional power are aware of the personal power you've built up. Now, if you're already a manager or supervisor, well, then you do have some positional power. Well, you want to ask yourself then, which one are you being most reliant on? Are you constantly threatening people with termination? Okay. Or are you working with them and developing them? If you find you are more reliant on one than the other, then that means your power base isn't balanced, in which case you want to start taking steps to increase your position power and increase your personal power. You want to get that scale to be a little bit more even than it is right now. So go back and listen to this episode again, take a deeper dive into the difference between positional power and personal power, and start taking some steps to build up the power that you're currently lacking, because you want to have an even distribution of them. Don't rely on personal power 100%. Don't rely on positional power 100%. They're going to benefit one another. So make sure you're focused on both and that you're doing your best to build up both your personal power and your positional power at work. And just remember, as Varys said in Game of Thrones, power resides where people believe it resides. So if you've got the title, that's not enough. Your followers need to see you as worthy of that title. And if you've got your followers' support, that's not enough. Your bosses, the higher-ups, need to see you as worthy of the trust of being delegated positional authority. Because you could be the best boss in the world. You could have employees that love you, that'll tell everyone you're the best boss in the world. But if the higher-ups disagree for whatever reason, it doesn't matter that you have all that personal power. You're likely going to lose positional power or not be granted more of it. So balance is key and perception is key. Make sure the organization has the perception of you as a leader, and make sure your followers perceive you as a leader who's worthy of their confidence and trust. And you'll be going a long way towards achieving a balanced power dynamic in the workplace. So that's our episode on power in the workplace. I hope it was helpful. I hope you kind of liked the Game of Thrones clip. We'll try to work stuff like that in more often, go to some not your typical sources. I personally, I love, I've got a whole library of quotes from HBO series, movies, books I'm reading. I love when I find stuff that ties into these leadership principles outside of academia. Academia is great, but I personally, I'm a pop culture guy. So I love finding those examples. So we'll work those in more often. If you've got examples of them, hit us up on social media. Let us know you're watching something, you see some leadership principles. Give us a shout out. Maybe we'll include it in a future episode. As always, I appreciate you for listening and watching. Check out realcustomtraining.com. We've got some new and exciting things coming up. We're going to be rolling out soon leadership investment packages. So this is going to be an opportunity for your organization to work with Real Custom Training in making a substantial investment in the leadership skills of your people. So keep an eye out for that. Check out realcustomtraining.com. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on LinkedIn. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, and let people know about Better Workdays if episodes like this have been helping you acquire concepts and skills to be better leaders in the workplace. All right, thanks a lot, folks. I will see you next week.